Welcome to the second principle for thinking like Leonardo da Vinci. Dimostrazione. Say it in your best Italian accent. Dimostrazione. One more time with a big gesture. Dimostrazione. Molto bene. Dimostrazione. A commitment to test knowledge through experience, persistence, and a willingness to learn from mistakes. Dimostrazione was the term Leonardo used to emphasize the importance of thinking for yourself and persisting through mistakes and setbacks. Our symbol for dimostrazione is the maestro's 3 views of a flower. Each one is exquisite, but together they represent his advice to us on developing independence of mind. Learn to consider important ideas from multiple perspectives. Whether studying a flower or the human body, he stressed the importance of exploring from multiple angles. In his anatomical notebooks, he explains, if you wish thoroughly to know the parts of the man anatomically, you require to see it from different aspects, considering it from below and from above and from its sides. He adds, therefore, by my drawings, every part will be known to you, and by all means of demonstrations from these different points of view, each part. This exploration will help you be more resilient in the face of life challenges. You'll sharpen your critical thinking, independence of mind, and liberate yourself from limiting beliefs as you learn how to learn whatever it is you've always wanted to learn. If you want to learn to juggle, it's great to read books about it, study the geometry, physics, and engineering principles that make it work, or watch someone else do it. But to actually learn, you must start by throwing and dropping lots of balls. Lots of balls. Leonardo da Vinci is one of humanity's greatest champions for independent original thinking. He urged his students to become an inventore, an original independent thinker. What was the challenge to original independent thinking in the 15th century? Besides the strictures of the church, the most basic problem was the lack of access to information. Books were rare. If you could find one, it would be in Latin, which you wouldn't have learned unless you came from a noble family. In 1494, at age 42, Leonardo taught himself Latin so he could read the classics as they became available, thanks to the increasing use of the printing press that had been invented in the 1440s. Leonardo loved to read, but he reasoned that academic knowledge had to be validated in experience. He proudly referred to himself as uomo senza lettere, a man without letters, and he sometimes signed his name as discepolo dell'esperienza, a disciple of experience. He wrote, I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Being willing is not enough. We must do. Leonardo's father, Piero, was a member of the Guild of Accountants and Notaries in Florence. But Piero wasn't married to Caterina, Leonardo's mother, so his son was disqualified from potential membership in the Accountants Guild and from a more formal academic education. But for this quirk of fate, Leonardo probably would have been the greatest accountant of all time. Instead, his father sent Leonardo at around age 15 to apprentice with the master sculptor and painter Andrea del Verrocchio, whose studio was the top vocational school in the region. He had Leonardo prepare canvases, paints, and sculpting materials, including bronze and gold. In the process, Leonardo cultivated a sense of down-to-earth practicality in his quest for knowledge. Leonardo's independence of mind shines through all his work, and he was not apologetic about challenging the dominant authorities of his time. He writes, "Many will think that they can with reason blame me, alleging that my proofs are contrary to the authority of certain men held in great reverence by their inexperienced judgments, not considering that my works are the issue of simple and plain experience, which is the true mistress." And remember, this was at a time described by historian William Manchester as an era in which it was commonly believed that all knowledge was already known and nothing would ever change. In other words, at a time when no one questioned much of anything, Leonardo questioned everything. He was driven to discover truth for himself rather than accepting any agreed upon notion as fact. Leonardo advises, if you find from your own experience that something is a fact and it contradicts what some authority has written down, then you must abandon the authority and base your reasoning on your own findings. Leonardo championed reason and investigation over dogma and authority. For example, in the 15th century, it was an unquestioned belief that the fossils of sea creatures on the top of the mountains in Lombardy, many miles from the sea, were brought there by the flood described in the Bible. Leonardo questioned this explanation and walked the mountains himself to see the fossils and the land in which they were formed. His observations led him to formulate a more scientific explanation. He was the first to posit the idea that the fossils were formed by geological upheaval. The mountains, once flat and covered by water, were pushed upward through pressure and brought the fossils with them. This represents the birth of the contemporary science of geology. And after making his case based on evidence and reason rather than authority and superstition, Leonardo called those who accepted the flood theory a sect of ignoramuses. Leonardo also understood that learning through experience means learning from mistakes. Leonardo took colossal risks and made staggering blunders, many of which were in public view. Just to name a few, his flying machines were notorious for plummeting in an almost cartoon-like fashion straight off the hills where he launched them into the ground below. He spent a massive amount of his sponsors' money in disastrous attempts to divert the Arno River. Most notably, he rejected the popular method of fresco painting. Fresco means fresh and involved painting on fresh plaster. This meant that the work had to be completed quickly, and Leonardo felt that although the method was a reliable means of preserving the work, the time constraint led to superficiality of expression. He wanted to bring out much greater nuance in his works, so he experimented with new painting techniques designed to allow the paint to dry slower and therefore give him more time to make profound paintings. He did this in the Battle of Anghiari, in the Florentine Town Hall, and most notably in the Last Supper at the Church of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan. But the experimental technique was flawed, and in both cases, moisture in the walls led to distortions of the work and still complicate preservation efforts today. One of Leonardo's particularly hilarious blunders was his attempt to automate Ludovico Sforza's kitchen. Leonardo was asked to preside as head chef for one of Sforza's giant banquets with over 200 guests. Leonardo planned to sculpt each dish and make each serving a mini work of art. So, in order to create and serve that amount of food with such detail, Leonardo built a new, more powerful stove and designed a complex system of mechanical conveyor belts to move plates around the kitchen to the nearly 100 artists he hired to help sculpt the food. He also designed and installed what was the very first sprinkler system in case of fire. Well, everything that could go wrong did go wrong in the massively overcrowded kitchen. The conveyor system failed and then fire broke out. The only thing that worked all too well was the sprinkler system, which caused a flood that washed away all of the food and a good portion of the kitchen. Leonardo's long list of mistakes, failures, and disasters never stopped him from exploring, experimenting, and taking risks. He had heroic persistence and knew that big failures often lead to big discoveries. And it's worth noting that although his flying machine didn't fly, his design was hundreds of years ahead of its time and formed the basis of the contemporary glider. Although his diversion of the Arno failed, his insights into hydraulics were accurate and, again, far ahead of their time. Despite the technical problems with the Battle of Anghiari and the Last Supper, the two works are among the most influential in the history of art. And despite his kitchen disaster, his notes about conveyor belts and production lines prefigured Ford's assembly line by 400 years. He originated the innovation of a sprinkler system to defend against fire, and his culinary aesthetic was ultimately adopted by proponents of Nouvelle Cuisine. Leonardo inspires us to find the courage to go beyond our fears, try new things, and go right to the source to gain knowledge directly. The ability to treat mistakes as learning opportunities is the key to activating our genius and reaching new heights of creativity, self-discovery, and innovation. Let's explore the application of the principle of dimostrazione. Avanti!